listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, September 16th, 2022, for reals, it's an episode.
It is. So, I was so excited last week about Star Trek Day that we just couldn't record an episode.
I mean, honestly, I tried talking to you, and you were just gibberish. You were.
I was just so
brain
Star
had
Trek.
melted. It was a lot of Star Trek. That perhaps too much Star Trek, really.
Or really too much smoke and heat.
Honestly, yeah, smoke up there. We've been getting a lot of smoke down here too, but that was eclipsed by how friggin' hot it was, and It was rude. Like
it was rude. Damn it, world.
Yeah, right. I demand a refund. No, for 2 weeks straight here in Sacramento, we had every single day for 14 days was over 100 degrees, and it was bad. But like all those fires and stuff happening, so we're starting to get smoke too. But actually, that started the smoke started creeping down here later in that 2 week period, and actually started cooling things down.
Right,
because it was blocking the goddamn sun, and it was what was also rude was that like literally we had 2 weeks of over 100 degree weather. The next day, like it was Saturday, I think. It's like, you know what, 90. The day after that, 87. I'm like, no, I mean, yes, thank you, but like you are being weather are being super inconsistent and rude. So like
a jerk.
Yeah. If we're going to get hot, warm us up to it slowly. If you're going to cool us down, I thank you for just dropping it, but like I expected kind of like it makes it seem like you had the choice all along, weather.
Right.
and I don't appreciate your devious nature. So that's, I don't mean to come out hot against weather, pardon the pun, but like I got opinions and maybe it's controversial, maybe it's inappropriate, but like fuck weather right now. We're not on good terms. So,
when and I agree, right? Like to deal with the fact that basically like kind of locked in my home because of smoke, right? Like the idea that can't open windows, run an air filter, like. And it's like, I guess it's not weather, it's fire. But either way, like, I'm upset with fire,
Sure, fair. You know what? I can lump them in together. Maybe that's me being a bigot. I'm not sure. A weather bigot. That's not the name of the episode. But we've been dealing with stuff, but we're here. New episode. We said we would, and here we are. And hopefully we'll continue to do so unless things well, you know what? Things are trending to be even hotter. Not soon, but perhaps next year. Maybe we'll just take the summer off because it's unbearable. But before we get into what we want to talk about, I'm not a Nintendo fan per se, but they had a big Nintendo Direct today, and it apparently seemed to
this week
answer. Yeah, good call. Sorry. I forgot. It's been that long. I forgot how recording works, but. Answered a lot of wishes that hardcore Nintendo fans have. Breath of the Wild 2, as it was formerly known, now has a name. Was it Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, which may have delayed because that was the name that they came up with. May have delayed the Direct's debut because of incidents that have happened recently in the UK.
It's okay though. That, as I understand, they played it twice in Ireland.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Out of disrespect for the Queen. Yeah.
They announced that I think the N64 version of GoldenEye will be available through their online service. Mm-hmm. Prayers have been answered for diehard Pikmin fans. Pikmin 4 is announced. But like I said, my fandom of Nintendo is fairly limited in that I'm a Metroid fan, and yet again, they have...
You've learned to be disappointed.
Nothing. Okay. So like the big thing with Metroid is there have been sort of a lot of rumors, basically confirmed rumors that, well, one is it's not a rumor. It's Retro Studios has been working on Metroid Prime 4, the fourth entry in the first-person series of Metroid games, which are really well regarded. And more importantly, to me, there's been a long rumored and basically confirmed full-on HD remake of the first Metroid Prime game, which I've heard a lot of good things about the Prime games, and I want to play them, but I haven't because I heard those original games, which were released for the Wii, have like tank controls.
Or the GameCube, I think.
Oh, the GameCube. You're absolutely right. They're like terrible tank controls, and you have to to play it on the Wii U. You have to get out the actual Wii like sensor bar. I'm like, fuck no. I just put it out in a new version, and they didn't announce anything, and no updates for Metroid Dread. So I wasn't expecting anything, but I just, as a fairly new Nintendo quote-unquote fan, because I like Metroid, I'm just going to... It's nice to practice being disappointed. And speaking of disappointment, probably actually not. That was a bad segue. This week we're going to talk about our respective weeks in Geek. So, Andrew, what disappointed you? No, wait, that's the wrong word. What did you do for this week in Geek?
So, not disappointed,
good,
actually.
Good.
So, I watched a new show. And anyone that's listened to the show, this show, knows that this is no surprise. So the Netflix surprisingly still does television, right? They still have a few shows they're doing, and they just released a new show this last week, Cobra Kai Season 5.
Oh, a new season of a show.
Yeah, and we've talked about Cobra Kai and The Karate Kid a lot.
We have, yes. It inspired a full, couple weeks worth of content.
Yeah, and... so naturally I'd watch it, and I watched it. I'm trying to think what's the right way to approach this. So I enjoyed it. Actually, I thought it did a good job of taking the things that they've already done, moving them forward, acknowledging the history of. It's. I
felt like you did air quotes there. I can't see you, but I felt like you did air quotes.
It's weird because it's one of these things where, one of the things about the Cobra Kai series is it started very much in only Karate Kid Part 1, right? It was based on Johnny Lawrence, and it, but as they went forward, they started scooping from other movies in the series, right?
And brilliantly so, right? That was part of our take on it, especially with Karate Kid 2. We're like, whoa, this is actually being artfully done.
Right. And in season 4, they started to approach Karate Kid Part 3, right? They grabbed the villain.
On the surface, that's a bad thing.
Right. Well, Karate Kid Part 3 is not a good movie.
Right.
So when they grabbed the villain from that movie and then basically elevated him to prime villain status, right?
It's Terry Silver, right?
Terry Silver. So Karate Kid Part 5, Cobra Kai Season 5, he is the main villain.
Okay.
And so it's weird, right? You're like, oh, okay, we're watching a show about a really bad movie, right? But I will say that I actually really enjoyed it. I think the show, it struggled with the things it always struggles with, which is people are shitty to each other. One of my big complaints about the show is that bullying is just part of the show. People treat kids treating other kids like shit is just part of the show.
Yeah, and that extends to the source material, 80s
right.
Teenage action movies were just about how bullying is basically a terrorist threat.
But what I was really impressed with the fact that they brought in this character Terry Silver, who, I mean, the guy that played him, you look up his acting history, and it's oh, you did about one thing, right? He did not become a successful actor. Right. He did mostly one part and faded into obscurity. But he came back. And I find that and succeeded, especially now that he's the villain of the season. Right. So for those that haven't seen, spoiler, actually, I guess spoilers herein, at the end of season 4, it's revealed that he has basically gotten John Kreese, the villain of the previous seasons, arrested. and he's now taken over Cobra Kai.
Okay.
So he is now like the major villain of the show.
And for those that don't know, and again, if you're listening to the spoilers, like Kreese brought Johnny Silver back. Terry Silver. Kreese brought Terry Silver back, basically, by bullying him, in the sense that the character was doing great.
Right. He kind of moved on with life.
He was obviously making a lot of money hobnobbing with people in that tax bracket, and generally doing well and living a peaceful, happy life. And said, "Don't you remember Vietnam?" Well, I mean, like, don't you remember Vietnam? But also too, like, don't you remember beating the shit out of kids? And
right.
and basically triggered whatever. Well, in some ways, literally an addiction to not only to that, but specifically triggering an addiction to that kind of personality, that life. And like it's the monster he created, I guess, twice now, in a sense. Once in the original movie, and now in the show. And like where like it's a what do they call it? His is a story of relapse, ultimately, right? And I haven't seen season 5, I should say this, but like from what I've seen of season 4, like it was what Kreese did was evil by pulling this guy back in a lot of ways, and which makes the character so much more compelling, infinitely more compelling than it was in the original movie.
Well, and what I think they do really well is they acknowledge that like his whole shtick of the original movie was deception, right? That he's like he comes forward as an ostensible friend. Like he comes forward to like, oh, I'm going to help you, Ralph Macchio. I'm gonna help you like do the thing you want to do. I'm gonna help you be the person you want to be.
And he gets Daniel to join Cobra Kai, right?
Right.
In the movie.
To
be clear about that. Yeah.
And so the idea that like they emphasize in the movie that like his whole thing is like he's deceptive. And even when they talk about like his fighting style, like in the movie, it feels that way. Like his whole thing is like it's about like, you know, whatever, like hitting people when they're down and stuff like that, or tricking, you know, like cutting people down before they can fight back. And what I actually really liked about this in season 5 is that that's his whole thing. And they make that like the idea that he basically, it's that kind of thing where like he convinces our protagonist, Daniel LaRusso, to harm himself, right? Like he's so like, you know, like so top level deceptive guy that's like, I will convince you to hurt yourself. Which then they have a scene early on where, because they've brought back all the characters, Chosen, who's the villain from Karate Kid Part 2, who's now a friend, sees him fighting, sees Terry Silver fighting, and he's like, oh, I've seen this style before. This is, you know, master boop doop doop doop, which is what they said in the original Karate Kid Part 3. But they're like, oh, this is a, you know, a Korean martial artist who like ostensibly did this style, but actually his whole style was about deception, right? It was about tricking you into thinking and then hitting you when you're down. And it's like, oh, you just gave this character in this shitty movie context that makes the shitty movie make more sense. So to watch this season 5, to see like, oh, you've given this character like way more context. Also like acknowledging what his weird obsession was. Like he, you know, they give kind of like, why is it that he wants to make Cobra Kai the biggest thing ever? Like they justify that. They explain it. It's like, oh, he actually, again, spoilers, he wants to take his Korean master, I forget his name. He wants to make that like nationally known or internationally known. In fact, he's discovered like an international karate tournament, and he wants to bring this guy's style to that tournament and make it known. Okay, so you've given context to a shitty movie. Good. You've taken the story that's already going on, and you've made a new villain who actually, like, now it's like, oh, he's like a more gross villain than what the show already had. Like, John Kreese was gross.
Terrible.
But now this guy's like, Terry Silver's like, ooh, you're real gross. Okay, cool, and to see, like, a lot of the characters kind of, mix around the kids, right? Like, and even the adults, kind of like, oh, newfound friendships, newfound whatever. They lean into that idea of people not being on the side that ostensibly they should be, because they realize, like, maybe I'm on the wrong team. So
that's where the soap opera aspect of the show comes in,
right?
Too.
It's soap opera with fights,
basically. Yeah, it's so it's wrestling.
It is. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I discovered that apparently the actor that plays John Kreese was in fact doing promos for wrestling like a week ago. I was like, what is this? But anyway, so it was. So I really enjoyed it. And actually what I liked about the season was it ends with, again, spoiler, it ends with kind of like, Terry Silver is defeated, he's arrested, he is, like, taken out of the picture, and also basically Cobra Kai is wrecked. Like, the kids are all shown, the dude you were following is bad. And we see all the major characters resolve their differences, right? So, like, for example, in the show, we have Johnny Lawrence basically has two sons, right? He's got his actual biological son, and he's got his sort of
Beetle. Yeah.
Adoptive son. Well, Blue Beetle is his adoptive son, right?
Yes.
And they resolve their issues about halfway through the season. And then the two girls in the show, Daniel LaRusso's daughter and then the other woman, they also kind of resolve their issues.
All right.
And so basically everyone kind of works together to solve the problem.
So they kind of wrap up the show then. So, okay.
That's what it feels like, right? So at the end, we see the bad guy carted away. We see, like, all the kids being like, oh man, we're in the wrong house, Let
me guess. After the credits roll, it's a pitch black screen and you hear a phone ring. You hear a guy pick up the phone and talk about some real ominous shit, and then says, "Of course, Mr. President."
No. They.
I'm down for the Metal Gear Solid ending. Is what I'm saying.
No, it's actually it's the ending that they, like, the unfinished hook they give. Again, spoilers. John Kreese spends the whole season in prison.
Okay.
In the last episode, he basically breaks out, and he's basically been told by everyone, like, get bent, right? Like,
so
we're not going to help you.
Late 70s guy is breaking.
It breaks out of prison. Sure. And it's like the idea, like, well, he can't start another karate club because he's literally an escaped felon. So it is like, okay, you finish up the show, but this one thing, except this one thing is nonsense, right? like all the kids have worked it out. Okay, good. We're moving. So it's like, to me, the show's over, right? I know they're going to probably make another season or 5, but...
which is bizarre by Netflix own standards.
I know, right? Well, they're short seasons, right?
That's true. That's true. They don't take 3 years to make, like, apparently Stranger Things.
So. But so what I will say is that, like, I think they did it. And the one thing actually I will say, I forgot to mention, oh my gosh, and they wrapped up all the cameos, mostly, right? They brought back, and I like... It's the kind of thing where you're, like, watching it, you're like, wait, you're bringing that guy back? So the in Karate Kid Part 3, Daniel LaRusso meets a new girl. I forget her name. And she's like, the actress is not super anything. They brought her back. And in fact, they tie her into the story in a way that was like, oh, really? Like, they reveal she's the cousin of his wife.
Oh, okay.
And the whole way that he, I forget it's the
from the next Karate Kid?
No, it's the girlfriend from Karate Kid Part 3.
Oh,
the idea that she comes from Ohio, meets Daniel, like, whatever, they have adventures, and then she goes back home, and they reveal, like, when she went back home, she told her cousin, when he moved to California, check out this guy, and that's where we, like, the idea that his wife, that's how they met. And they also bring back, like, the other villain of Karate Kid Part 3, like the weird karate kid that Terry Silver hires to be, like, the ringer. So they bring him back.
They found that poor guy and brought him
right, another guy who's like
that man was Paul Rudd or something.
Well, he's been doing like soap operas for 20 years, right? So they're like, all right, do you want to come back and do a karate thing? He's like, well, of course. Sure. Yeah. So he did 2 or 3 episodes, and actually, I think just when you understand the whole mythology of this, they actually have the scene where Johnny Lawrence, Chosen, and Mike Barnes, this third guy, they all go to fight Terry Silver together in the last episode. And and when you pause and think, oh, these are all the villains of every Karate Kid movie going together to fight the real villain, right?
It's pretty great.
It's absurd, but it works.
So the thing is like, it sounds like the season, while probably good on its own, for you as one of the chosen few, not a character, who has taken upon himself to bear the burden of having watched Karate Kid Part 3, actually got an incredible amount of satisfaction out of it. I'm sure, like I said, it's probably fine on its own, but like, it's almost like an apology for that movie. It's like, hey, if you suffered through this film, this one's for you guys. And all of a sudden, you don't have to go to therapy anymore.
Right. And I definitely think like they do that they very much apologize for that movie, even though no one involved was part of the production, right?
Right.
Other than the 2 actors, or 3, I guess. But I think it works out. Like, I think they actually take what is a really shitty movie and turn it into part of their world.
Yeah.
Which I think works.
I'm glad you got this closure more than anything.
I mean, the real thing for me is just that, like I said, other than that one loose thread of John Kreese escaping prison,
right,
which doesn't fit with the weird sports show, like he can't start a new studio or whatever, dojo, right? Like he's a escaped felon. Like this, there's no way this show continues in the same way it did. Which is why I'm like, all right, it's done, right? It's done, or it becomes a very different show. But I do like what they did, and I appreciate that they brought a lot of these characters. Actually, I will say like the 2 boys, Blue Beetle and the other guy, like the whole context is that there's a scene earlier where Johnny Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso were talking, and they said, "Gosh, maybe if we just like had fought it out as kids, we would have like fixed our shit then, rather than carrying the burden." Honestly. And so that's Johnny Lawrence is like, well, all right, these are basically my 2 boys. I gotta fix it. So he says, all right, guys, fight. Yeah. Which, if you know Johnny Lawrence, like, of course, his solution is like the dippest dipshit he could. And actually, like, they do the scene really well where it's a very intense, fight, and it literally ends with like you're sitting there like, oh shit, they're on an upper balcony, like Miguel's gonna kick what's his name, Robbie? Over the edge, Robbie, he's gonna kick him over the edge. You're like, oh no, and they have that moment where he stops, and he says like, oh, and then they have the conversation about why did you stop, why didn't you stop,
right, strike first.
And it was like, and it worked out, like it was like, oh wow, this feels like cool shit, like I think they did good stuff with this for what is essentially a sports show, right?
Well, I mean, it's
a sports soap opera
show in that there is active people in it.
Well, but also the main plot always focuses on a sporting event. Right. But so either way, so I watched it. I enjoyed it. It is. And honestly, the one thing I also appreciate really is, people talk about the whole Netflix thing of like, oh, if people don't binge it all in 3 days, it doesn't count. That's stupid, Netflix. Get fucked.
It is
but
dumb.
Also, this series is only 10 episodes at about 30 minutes apiece. So, like, that's actually not...
It's an afternoon, right?
It's like a weekend of, like, 2 movies, right? So, if you're gonna have that rule... good on you for making that possible. So,
yeah, actually, not to go off topic there, but Neil Gaiman made a really interesting point about that, because he's been really candid about the success of The Sandman, Netflix show. I mean, he's been very candid because it's been doing very well, right? But the thing is, he did lay it out clearly, saying like, because someone's like, I like to take my time with shows, and so we don't binge. We watch maybe an episode a day or maybe every other day. Like, does that factor into the numbers? And he literally said, no, they don't. That's not the demographic they're tracking. Like, what determines success as far as Netflix is concerned is who is watching it all or a big chunk in a go.
Right.
And like, that is fucked. That's gross. Really, really
Which
bad.
I feel bad because I'm watching Sandman, but I'm only 6 episodes in, and I don't count anymore.
You're part of the problem.
I am.
I mean, that's exactly how I watched it, but that's not the point.
Only I'm part of the problem.
Yep.
But anyway, so Cobra Kai season 5. I will say that like if you watch this show and the 3 movies,
what an experience.
I think it wraps up well. Like you could stop now and feel like, all right, good. And I say that because I know like the dipshits in charge want to do a whole like Karate Kid cinematic universe or something.
Sure.
Okay, guys. The only character you have left, I think, is Hilary Swank.
Hell yeah, that's what I was hoping you'd say at the end. The loose thing.
I know.
She comes out of shadow. She's like super jacked and covered in fucking scars, missing a goddamn eye. And she's like, I heard Miyagi's missing, or something like that. Miyagi died.
And honestly, I suspect that they're going to, assuming they get a season 6 or 7, they're going to
assuming they can get an Oscar-winning actress on board.
I mean, they can apparently convince anyone to do this shit, right?
Anyway,
I will say that this is, if you want to watch this show and you can know that it has an ending that feels complete at season 5.
And so had season 5 just dropped? Is that the story you're telling?
Week.
Okay.
I know. So I watched something on time.
In this case, you are not part of the problem.
I know.
Or maybe you still are, actually, if you look at it from a different angle.
Netflix acknowledged my accomplishment.
Netflix approved.
So anyway, that was my Week in Geek, my Karate Week in Geek. Dan, what about you?
I watched people play video games.
Oh, that's a choice.
So incredibly non-involved this week, right? No, there's a podcast I really like called Nextlander, and it's a crew of 3 guys that came from another website and the podcast that I really liked. They called Giant Bomb. They left and started their own thing. And one of the guys that is on the show, he's like a dad. His name is Vinny Caravella, and he loves adventure games. Mm-hmm. He especially loves FMV games.
Oof.
And so the fans know that, and so they put up a poll every week for Patreon subscribers or whatever, and they're like, what game should we play this Friday? It's always the FMV game that's on the list. Because he's also the kind of guy that likes, like, how can we break this game? But that aside, they decided to, I think this was actually...
Quick interrupt.
Yeah.
For the 3 of you that don't know, FMV games, right? There was this whole era...
You're lowballing that number, dude.
There's a whole era in the mid to late 90s of when game developers discovered they could do full motion video.
FMV.
Because they had CDs and stuff. Suddenly there's a whole crop of these games where like it was some permutation of here are actors acting out scenes, and then you play a little bit of game, and then you see actors acting out scenes.
And it always looks bad. But that's part of the charm.
Well, back then it was fucking cutting edge, man.
Right. And it's everything from like maybe what you might be familiar with something like Dragon's Lair, which that's not filmed actors, that was animation, but it's like they're like fully rendered scenes, and then you have to make a choice, so everything just kind of stops for a second, and then you make a choice, and then but like other games like Mad Dog McCree,
or I mean Seventh Guest,
Phantasmagoria, if I'm not
Phantasmagoria 1 and 2.
Yeah, right. It's a notorious genre, for lack of a better word, and one of the reason why I bring that up is because there was specifically one game where adventure games and FMV games met. And I guess we should define what I mean by adventure games, because that can mean a lot of things. I think I'm using that as shorthand for point-and-click adventure games. Old PC-style games that are scenario-based, where you have a character and it's built around solving puzzles on screen, and it's about finding items to use, figuring out how to use those items so you can advance the story. You're actually the person that played more of these. Maybe you could describe it better.
Well, so it tends to be... the origin tends to be a lot of these text adventure games where it's just like there's a certain amount of exploration, a certain amount of figuring out what stupid shit the designer wants you to do to move to the next room, basically.
Right, basically, yeah. It's Saw, really.
Right, like it's... but yeah, so it really, I think that's the context of...
Made most popular by companies like Sierra Online?
Yeah, Sierra Online
and LucasArts.
LucasArts.
Or Lucas Games?
LucasArts.
Sierra with their Quest games, right? Heroes Quest, which was renamed Quest for Glory, was it what they were named to?
King's Quest, Space Quest, Police Quest.
And then LucasArts with a variety of things, Maniac Mansion, and Full Throttle, and Secret of Monkey Island, and Grim Fandango.
Right.
A lot of really good games. I've played mostly LucasArts games more than I have Sierra games.
Right.
That being said, they're known for their own kind of finickiness, specifically pixel hunting, as it's called. And I actually read a really interesting article that I'll include in the show notes. I won't go into it here, but it's an article that details the rise and fall of point-and-click adventure games. It's really interesting how they kind of did themselves in their own way. But that's all that being said, context here. On the show, and so they do a podcast, and the Nextlander does podcasts and streaming stuff. Their fans voted for them to play through a video game called Gabriel Knight 2. And I forgot what the subtitle is, actually.
Something about a wolf.
Well, that's what it's about. The Beast Within, a Gabriel Knight Mystery.
There you go.
Gabriel Knight 2, The Beast Within.
Something about a wolf.
Indeed. It came out in 1995, and it is a point-and-click adventure game. But it is very different from its previous iteration, which was more like, from what I understand, the Sierra Online or LucasArts games. In that they were pixel-based sprites on a pre-rendered background, most likely. And this time they decided to use cutting-edge technology and do this whole thing in full-motion video. And I shouldn't say the whole thing. They replaced sprites with full-motion video recorded actors. So it's kind of like, for those that want to have this reference, it's like the original Mortal Kombat, where you have these really grainy but clearly filmed actors over pre-painted backgrounds. That's basically what it is, except you can move around freely.
And then every now and then there's a video clip.
Indeed. And it's always stilted and awkward. and it's really fun because, one, it made me a little nostalgic, even though I wasn't playing a lot of adventure games when they were hot. It's like, wow, I can imagine. It makes me think about, like, this was I can imagine when it came out, it was like, wow, this is like playing a movie, which I think was the intent. But I also know that it was very different from what came before for Gabriel Knight and what came after it. Now, before I go further, can you have some experience with the Gabriel Knight franchise? Can you lay it out for us? Do you know who made it? Is that
Sierra Online was the publisher?
It is Sierra. Okay.
Yeah, it was Jane Jensen, I believe is her name.
Yes. No, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah, she was so she came to Sierra as like a person, and that first game was like well received.
Yeah.
And actually the second game was well received as well.
Yeah.
I think it's considered one of the best FMV games ever.
Yeah.
And then the third game came out.
And from what I understand, has some aspects of it that were well received. But yeah, it's funny. Each sort of Gabriel Knight game was very different. The original one was that sort of more traditional Sierra style point and click adventure game. They went with FMV for the second one, and in the third one they went with 3D renders.
Right.
And and much more limited development time, from what I understand. Mm-hmm. But it's just really interesting because some aspects of it's fun to look at old games and see what holds up and what doesn't, right? FMV does not hold up at all. But and they're having a lot of fun with that. They're not making fun of the game so much, but like, there's a part of the game where you're playing as Gabriel Knight's assistant, and Grace is her name, I believe.
Right.
And every time she leaves this manor she's staying in, there's like a 10-second FMV clip of her stopping, putting on a coat, wrapping the belt around the coat, and leaving the door. And there's this really melodramatic music playing, and it's like, come on. But that aside, and I don't want to just brush it off saying like, well, at the time it was revolutionary. I'm sure at the time it was boring too. But beneath all that, like, what I find really interesting is the puzzle solving is really organic and folds really naturally, and really has a lot of fun with taking place in a foreign country. So the basic premise is Gabriel Knight is a novelist who in this game inherits land, I think, from some family in Germany. He's part of or I guess his name could be Gabriel Ritter. But
right. So I will give you the context.
Thank you.
In the first game, he discovers that he's descended from a line of Schattenjäger, Shadow Hunters. Yeah. And so the second game is him then, once he's resolved the issue of the first game, he then inherits his, I think, great uncle's estate,
right,
and goes out there to then figure out what it means to be a Schattenjäger.
Right, and it's just cool because like underneath all the goofiness, it's just really, there's like a lot of clever stuff going on here, and that's the interesting thing. Like they can have fun watching these people have fun with like the goofy acting, the strange FMV, but like the writing is pretty solid, and like the gameplay itself is like, there's parts where like, okay, we have a piece, but we're clearly missing a piece of something else, and just it really brought back like that kind of rush of like playing games when I was a teenager, like I can figure this out, and it's just cool to watch, especially considering it's a game and a series that I don't have any exposure to, aside from you talking about it and a lot of people speaking of Gabriel Knight with a lot of reverence. And I'm excited. I haven't finished the playthrough yet. I know they finished it because they've gone on to play the first one afterwards. And based on what we talked about before we started recording, it'll be interesting to see which version they play. But I guess that's like sort of the last shoe to drop here. I think the series also became very well known, or not well regarded, but well known because the lead character Gabriel Knight was, for the first and third games, voiced by one Tim Curry.
So right, was it also the third?
I believe so. Yeah, they brought him back, and the thing is, it's like Gabriel Knight is like a. Is he Louisiana? He's Cajun? Is he?
Well, he's from Louisiana. He lives in Louisiana. I don't know if he.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, I guess he does actually. Like they kind of, he does. Yes. Probably.
And he's kind of known for Tim Curry's performance is fairly well known for being very performance based. It's very, very wild and fun, and it's clear he's having a lot of fun. And
I always think about, there's a scene in the game where Gabriel Knight goes to, I think it's the manor of a wealthy Louisiana person, and who has a British butler voiced by Tim Curry. And it's the first time I've ever had that scene of like, oh, this person's just talking to themselves.
Right. So just this character from, what was it, Oscar? That movie with Sylvester Stallone.
I was thinking he's just playing himself from Clue.
Oh, that's true. Anyway, it's a goofy game. It's fun. It's fun to watch. And I haven't talked about it a lot very often, but like I have slightly gotten into the realm of watching Let's Plays, which is its own thing. Because there was a part of me when I first heard about Let's Plays, I'm like, that sounds like the biggest waste of time. But if it's a game I'm never going to play, and especially with played by personalities that I enjoy watching them and listening to them and especially watching them have fun with well, that sounds bad, but having fun with each other, but also it's enjoyable watching them sort of work through, in this case, game narratives. It's a really enjoyable experience, and has gotten me through these last couple of weeks, because it's been a tough couple of weeks, not only because it's been so hot, but because for me, I'm on the other side here. My day job has started up, and so I'm super busy now. It's just really fun to unwind watching people that feel like friends play fun games and goof around. And there's something to that,
Well, I think it helps that The Beast Within is probably one of the best, or at least considered the best FMV games. Actually, I think Wing Commander 3 and 4 are also really up there, because in terms of like the quality of the FMV.
Sure. I should say that the guy that plays Gabriel Knight is not voiced by Tim Curry, nor is the actor Tim Curry.
Nor is it Tim Curry.
They got this guy that just looks like he walked off the cover of a romance novel. It's pretty hilarious.
Well, and that's always that funny thing where I feel like the first couple of years of FMV was a lot of just like, all right, who's available?
Right. Tony in accounting.
I think Wing Commander was kind of unique at the time because they actually cast all
actors,
right? To the point where like, wow, you got people to show up for this. Whereas again, other games were just like, all right, Tom in accounting, you're going to be the dwarf,
Was Mark Hamill part of Wing Commander?
Yes.
Okay.
He was the main character.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. And he was also in Gabriel Knight.
We can't, really, the first one?
The first and third.
We can't also ignore Tim Curry's other FMV contribution through Command & Conquer, Red Alert, is that right?
Oh, Red Alert 3.
Red Alert 3, yeah. Dude, if you want to have fun, look up Red Alert 3 FMV cinematic sequences with Tim Curry, because he is apparently the scenery looked delicious because he is chewing it all throughout, man. He is having so much fun, dude.
But
he's it looks like he's like, can you believe they're paying me for this shit?
But it is that fun thing, and I still think a lot about the two probably the most prominent FMV games I played as a kid. I guess, young adult. Return to Zork and Seventh Guest, both of which are actually like not good in their own ways.
Yeah.
But certainly the most not good thing is in fact the fact that it was just like, hey, we got like some random people to play these characters.
Right.
Oh yeah, FMV. But no, I'm excited. You made me actually start looking up like, can I play The Beast Within? Because I've never played it. I was like, oof. I want to play it. I want to see awkward loading scenes of people putting on coats.
It's interesting because FMV games have had a weird resurgence lately, mostly in the indie realm, which is not surprising, actually. Like, one of the games that really stands out, I don't know if it count. I think it counts as FMV because it has pre-recorded video, but like Her Story, like this really deep and sort of modular look into basically like a fake OS of someone's computer, and the game is most famous for like not having an end state. It's like the game is done when you feel you've learned everything, and or what the game feels done when you've the line that came out was like, the game feels done when you are satisfied with what you've learned. And then someone asks, well, how do I know when I feel satisfied? It's like, well, that's a different problem for a different day. But there's a game out of Australia, I think, that is just like that leans into the goofiness of FMV. And there's some other, I forgot what it's called. Like, it's like, I'll figure it out and put it in post and put it in the show notes. But it's a lot, just leaning into, it's just become another realm of play for the indie scene. It's something we've talked about a lot, where like stuff that was back in the day, like AAA budgets and focus and expectations have become have come to the realm of indie, and like they're able to use these old formats, these old genres, and actually do something new with them, and also have like a fun time with higher quality, in this case, video and perhaps even acting, you know? And it's really cool to see that.
Yeah, and I, one of the things I think is interesting about FMV in video games is the idea that when it started, it was very much like everyone just threw shit at the wall and saw what stuck. And over time, there's this realization that, hey, you know what? FMV doesn't work for lots of things.
Right.
But there are certain places, like actually I think Red Alert 3 is a good example of, in the Red Alert series, in Command & Conquer, of actually it works okay because, you know, it's this very limited scope, you know?
Right.
And I think other games, like Her Story, another one where like in the way that they do the game, it makes sense.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. And the game I was thinking of, the one that's like really leaning into the goofiness of the FMV, is a game called Contradiction. So check it out. They really have a lot of fun with it. But yeah, so FMV, like it's something that I think the most exposure I had to it was seeing companies like Squaresoft like integrate FMV into like backgrounds of their Final Fantasy games, where they'd have sprites in the foreground and they have FMV video actually playing over the background. I remember
interrupting
like
FMV scenes, right?
Right,
like
it's super cool. Yeah, actually, I'm like, oh, this is actually very epic. But and then of course things like Resident Evil, you know, especially the original Resident Evil intro, man.
Yeah, that intro.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And I think maybe that's the best one to end on. That's this peak FMV.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So
FMV disaster. Yeah.
The best disaster. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media as well, such as Twitter and Instagram, where you can find us at our respective handles. On Twitter, you can find Andrew tweeting about tabletop role-playing game at ProfoundDark. You can find me at Bethel. You can also find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at ProfoundBrick and me and my work at Bethel Comics.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, or you may already be there because you're listening to the show on YouTube, because that's where it goes now. If you are there, or if you do follow the link, please like and subscribe, or as the kids like to say, ring the bell.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusi, the other is called District 4, and both written and performed by Kevin MacLeod, the Clan MacLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire. You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license. If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to go to the storefront and leaving some sort of review. Whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. Algorithms. I don't have an outro, but I do have a plug. This weekend, this Saturday, dear listeners, I'll be at the Pull Up a Chair Expo in Sacramento. One day, I think it's like 4 hours, celebration of tabletop gaming and pop culture and comics.
That's good.
Yeah, I was there last year, and they said it'll be even better this year. And so it'll be fun. It's kind of me still experimenting with going to different kinds of shows, and it's, you know, nerdy stuff is always cool. So if you want to come by,
that's good.
Find the details on my website at longjohncomic.com. But you know what? We're back, and we're here to talk about nerdy and geeky stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for your patience, dear listeners. So until we come back with another episode next week, I'm Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Rasplin.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
fucking wig, Andrew. I might change my fucking wig.
Ooh. Let me turn off my air purifier because welcome to Seattle. No, it's not. God damn it.
I'm recording.
So am I.
Oh, good. So we got that content.
You butt munch.
Capital Q content. Wait.
That's not... No.
Gabriel Knight 2.
Oh.
Right? All of a sudden, Andrew's like, I'm listening.
No, that's actually...
We're going full Frasier. This is quality content, or as I like to call it, QQ. And,
fucking die. just die. No, I'm teasing. No. I need, like, that. My lawyer brain needs to sit on that.
Okay. Rusty, I'm in the middle of storytelling. Rusty, you don't respect the narrative.
But holy shit, I have to pee.
You should go pee.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
Did you stop? Did he stop? I don't know if he stopped recording. And I'll try to put a link in. Rusty, I'm almost done.